Welcome. Hey, how everybody doing? It's time for our Wednesday Sunday live stream. I know most people are probably watching the Super Bowl. They do not care about this, which is fine. But I wanted to give an option to people who might not care about the Super Bowl. So what are we talking about tonight? So we're not going to do a long live stream because I do know that the Super Bowl is on and most people are going to be paying attention to that. But we have been having conversations on this channel for a little while now about wrestlers and how the image that they portray. We just had a conversation about John Cena wearing a skirt and heels and thigh high stockings or whatever the hell. And I feel like there was more left. There was some more meat on the bone, mainly because the Kevin Nash podcast started talking about actors. So they kind of taken it away from wrestling. And now they're kind of taking it to actors and not having a sense of danger. And actors not being tough guys, or at least not having a tough guy image. And it's very ironic that we've been having this conversation already on the channel. And also, since I watched the first two James Bond movies, I watched Dr. No and From Russia with Love within the last couple of hours, actually. I think I watched them this morning. So I can look at actors from the past, and they're going to compare some actors to today. Is Sean Oliver and Kevin Nash. So I don't want to do this for too long because I do want people to get back to the game and not to distract from the game. Everybody in their pizza and chicken wings. That's perfectly fine. But I feel like I owe the people who are pretty regular viewers of the channel their weekly live stream. Uh, what's up, WG Phil? Z Kid or Zay Kid, however. Am I watching the Super Bowl? I watched up to the point of when it was time to do the show. So it was 14-14 last time I looked. Uh, so I mean, there that is. I don't really. This is the one game a year that I probably will end up watching, but I don't really like how. I don't like the halftime thing. I was trying to wait for halftime, but 8 o'clock is 8 o'clock. I mean, let's do it. Let's just do it. Get out of the way. And when it's over, it's over. Hopefully, I can do this in 30 to 45 minutes. Maybe I could do it a little bit longer. Depends on how many people climb in. But mostly, I'm expecting this to have a lot of people who are going to come in on the tail end, or people who are going to end up watching this at some point throughout the week. So that's just kind of it. WG Phil says, pick 5 wrestlers for me to do an Elimination Chamber match against Roman for the title. I'm guessing you mean the video game? Most of the 2021 releases are still in the game. I don't know. 5 wrestlers, I guess Braun Strowman. Is LA Knight in the game? Then LA Knight, Ricochet, Stone Cold Steve Austin, if he's even playable. And wait, that's 3. AJ Styles and Carl Anderson. Who knows? Who cares? 24, 22, or 23. I don't know. I don't know what we're talking about here. I have no idea. All right. So, also, yeah, I forgot that there are some Europeans. Because Darren Gordon Hill popped up. I was like, oh, yeah, got to be some Europeans on here. So Kevin Nash on his podcast, we're talking about actors not being tough. And that's going to be our central. Oh, I don't think the Good Brothers are on 2022, but the central points of this video today is going to talk about actors not having an element of danger, not having an air or an image of toughness, and they're going to basically lament that. And since that's something that we talk about a lot on this channel, I figured it is a good thing to spend a little bit of time during our Sunday Super Bowl stream discussing. I don't want to turn this into like a PUA red pill channel, which I have been trying to avoid because I don't necessarily like that kind of content. But it is becoming a crisis of masculinity in pro wrestling and acting and music, etc., where we're starting to lose a lot of the more masculine voices. Even I mean, even some of the more toxic voices, you know, sometimes that stuff is needed as a counterbalance to some of the other individuals that are on the platforms. Now, as far as my ventures into other media, the Digging In series, I said I was going to do Kick Ass. I finally finished the Kick Ass comic book series. I'm finally done with it. Now I'm going to have to go through, pick out some of the story elements, and I'm going to have to watch the movie. We're probably going to do it first weekend of March. We're probably going to do Kick Ass in our Digging In series. Um, so that ought to be nice. I want to look into some interviews by Mark Miller and John Romita Jr., but that's going to take some time. I got several weeks now that I'm done with the comic series to watch the two movies. I want to do both movies, and so then we're going to do that. And as far as comic books, I bought the new My Hero Academia. I have that. I also have ventured over into the Darwin Cook Parker graphic novel series. So I got volume 2, which is called The Outfit. I haven't read it yet, but I like crime drama, so this is right up my alley. So I'm definitely going to be reading that. And I got from the Michael Moorcock or Elric library, I have the P. Craig Russell Elric stories, in a hardcover book. It cost me about $25, but I'm deciding I'm going to try that. I'm a really big fan of Michael Moorcock and the Elric series, so those are going to be pretty fun as far as I'm concerned. But that's not what we're here. We're just kind of throwing these ideas around as things that we usually talk about on this channel. So yeah, rabbit hole, I'm guessing. So let us go to now Sean Oliver and Kevin Nash discussing actors and actors not having an element of danger.
Let me tell you something about the stars of old, though. Here's the difference between the movie stars of the 70s and today. The element of danger. Nobody thinks that any of the male movie stars today could kick their ass. Nobody.
This is 100% true. This is factual information. A lot of these guys, they have such, I guess you could say, soft persona. And maybe that's, by design, that they have a soft persona. It makes them very popular, I guess, with women and with less masculine males. And interestingly enough, they used Henry Cavill in the thumbnail, so I did too. But I picked him mostly because I don't think he really fits Superman. He's a decent to good looking man, but in terms of having the hard edge that Superman is supposed to have, I'm not so sure. Well, Superman doesn't really need a hard edge, but having a pretty boy Superman, I'm not entirely sure is the right move. Pretty boy Superman, not really a big fan of that. But I didn't think Henry Cavill was a bad guy. I don't want anybody to think that I'm attacking actors as bad people. I just think that we're observing the change in actors from the past. They're talking about from the 70s to today. And I think there's a pretty good point to be made here about this.
Nobody. None of today's movie stars are kicking anyone's ass. Maybe Clooney could knock out David or Russell. But go back. Look at guys like Steve McQueen, Burt Reynolds, that era. There was an element of danger to being a male movie star back then.
One of my favorite lines ever, we're smoking a joint, driving down the road, hadn't said a word to each other probably in about 35 minutes. And Rude's to my right, I'm driving, and out of nowhere, Rude goes, "Remember when you were a kid, man, you thought that Beretta had some good jacks on him? That he had some arms?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Yeah. I used to think, like, you knew that Beretta could probably go, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And that was it.
It was Robert Conrad, right?
No,
Was
who
it
was
Beretta?
Beretta was
Robert Blake.
So they're talking about, guys being muscular, in shape, or whatever. And this takes me to my watch of Sean Connery as James Bond. And it's an interesting dynamic, because if Sean Connery was anything as James Bond, he portrayed sort of the very essence of a masculine character, not just in how he dealt with people. He was very stern, with women, with other men. He was also quite soft and charming with the women. He is what you think James Bond is. Like, most people have not even read a James Bond novel, you know, and their vision of James Bond comes from the movies. So when you look at somebody like Sean Connery, he's not a pretty boy like Pierce Brosnan. He is a well put together, like, he's in shape, like a guy who works out, but he's not massively muscular. He's wearing a suit through the entire movie anyway, so even if he was like super duper jacked, you wouldn't even be able to tell, because he's wearing a suit through most of the movie. But he portrays strength. He has a strong vision. He has a strong jaw, for instance. He's very playful and coy with women. He doesn't simp. One of my favorite scenes from, I believe, Dr. No is when he's flirting with Moneypenny, you know, and how he gets like really close to her, almost to the point where they're like rubbing noses, and she's playing coy, but it's a cat and mouse game between the two of them, and he's very well adept at it, and she's receptive, but also kind of not so sure, and you can see in the movies how this guy, he comes across like a guy who maybe, just maybe, he will kick your ass if need be, and it just feels like he's not trying to intimidate you by being overly muscular and overly tough or overly aggressive, but he's very firm, right? He's firm in pretty much every way. And yes, he does smack a chick, especially in From Russia with Love. He smacks Tatiana because she was lying to him. So he's also very physical, in so much as that he physically handles people. He physically handles the women. He has no problem touching them. He has no problem with them touching him. He moves the women around. If he has to push her, he will. If he has to throw her, he will. If he has to punch her, he will. You know, but it's not abusive. It is, you disrespected me. In that sort of sense, where male or female, disrespect is met with the same response. That's an equality situation right there. People don't want that. But I generally really, really liked Sean Connery as James Bond. And I hadn't seen these movies in a long time. So imagine how refreshing they were to wake up and just watch, these movies and feel like, damn, why can't we have anything like this today? We can never have a well-built male actor who's not he's not a supermodel, but he probably could get away with doing some modeling. He's a very physical guy. He's a little bit rebellious. He's a little rough around the edges, but uh, a he's not a diva, right? He's a he's a tough guy, but he's not a diva. You know what I'm saying? He likes the finer things. He likes nice suits. His nice little drink. But he smokes a cigarette, but he's not one of these beardy, weird, compulsively drinking, compulsively smoking, everything in moderation kind of guys. Like, he has everything under control. He can control his alcohol. He can control his cigarettes. He can control his women. He can control his attitude. He can control his anger. He can control his physicality. He can control himself. That's what masculinity is all about, for the most part, is about having control. And then this is something that I stumbled upon it when it comes to Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson. They talked a lot about guys, society telling guys to be emotional. This is an Andrew Tate quote. I'll try to think of it off the top of my head, where he talks about when you teach men to be emotional, they become violent because that's the emotion that they are most connected with. And what ends up happening is that these guys, they act out. You get bullies, school shooters, etc., because these guys don't know how to control their emotions. But you have a guy like a James Bond who can control his emotions. He doesn't scream at anybody throughout the movie. He raises his voice, every now and again to get attention, to show that he's serious about this subject that he's talking about. But there's no crying. He doesn't really sell getting his ass beat too much. Like, he doesn't get too upset about anything. He's very even centered. In some ways, you could say that's a negative. It's not really a realistic portrayal of a man, but at the same time, it is what guys don't really like the idea of feeling so much sympathy from another guy. That's why in wrestling terms, baby faces appeal mostly to women and children. They appeal to men in so much as they're tough. A guy goes through a lot. Another man can appreciate that. But the selling, the facial expressions, the being down and out, that kind of stuff appeals to women and children because they want to see you as a hero in order for you to come up, get up. But that's what the men want. The men want to see the fire. The men want to see that you're down, but you're not going to stay down. You haven't given up. You're going to keep coming back. That's what they want to see. And you can be a handsome man and still have fire and intensity, etc., etc. And that's missing in acting. It's missing in wrestling. It's missing a lot, So let's continue with these guys because I think they were making a good point.
No, who was Beretta? No, Beretta was
Robert Blake.
Yeah, Robert Blake. Yeah.
Remember Robert Blake?
Steve McQueen rules, by the way. I saw Bullet. If you haven't seen Bullet, please go watch Bullet. It's another movie from like the 60s or 70s. And Steve McQueen probably could have done James Bond very good too. So we're talking about, actors. And these guys, to be quite honest, a lot of these guys, they were so good at being men because they were men. And what I mean by being men, they actually did serious stuff. Like, a lot of these guys were in the military. A lot of them were military guys. They took up sports. They played sports in high school and college and stuff like that. And it wasn't they trained in jiu-jitsu for 45 years or whatever, and now they're perfectly capable of being a badass in a movie. It's like, no, they had real life experiences that allowed them that shaped them and made them stronger so that they can handle these situations that they now find themselves in. So this is very interesting. I always make suggestions on this
that David Lynch movie. Pull a still up of this. It's from Lost Highway, I think, or Mulholland Drive. No, Lost Highway. Robert Blake, who's off camera for years, and then comes back as this creepy ass figure. It was one of those like Travolta moments, I call them, like when, yeah, I remember that. Tremendous. But to the point.
What did he get? Did he shoot? Didn't he shoot his wife?
Yeah, there was a bit of an issue I think he had there.
Did he get out of it?
All right, so Darren Gordon Hill is making a good point here. That a lot of men now are Homer Simpson or Cliff Huxtable. As a kid, I didn't pay that much attention, but I started noticing it maybe a few years ago. The Homer Simpsonization, the Fred Flintstoning of male characters with the round bodies and obsessed with not being able to control themselves. For instance, Cliff Huxtable was a guy who was basically controlled by his wife. She constantly would tell him what to eat, how much to eat, when he can eat. And you get this general idea that she was in control of the household. You know, it was it was interesting watching the Cosby Show as a kid because you're taught to look at the Cosby Show from the racial angle. That is the first black family. It is, well, not first black family, because there were many black family TV shows, but they were middle class. You know, the father's a doctor, the mother's a lawyer, the kids somehow are mixed race. Like one of them is like super high yellow. How is that possible? Who knows? But you look at the Cosby Show from the perspective of gender. You know, Theo is an idiot, by the way. You know, he's a troublemaker, which is typical among teenage boys, and which is, kind of acceptable in a way. Just how, that routine Theo, Will from Fresh Prince of Bel Air, he's a troublemaker. He's constantly getting in trouble, that kind of thing. That's acceptable because teenage boys do get in trouble. I mean, it is what it is. But it's the fathers that have been the focus that I've noticed over the years. They gotten, especially they've gotten round in terms of just being fat. You know, Bill Cosby constantly getting made fun of for his weight and him eating sandwiches in bed, big subs or whatever in the bed. Fred Flintstone, Homer Simpson, the fucking Family Guy, fat guy. Um, it's constant with this. Family Matters, fat dad. You know, Cleveland Brown, fat dad, and it's like, you know, it's 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 supposed to be realistic, but generally speaking, you're talking about men who have no discipline, and I say this as, I'm looking at it from that perspective, that the male vision of being disciplined and having control and doing things in moderation, that seemed to be lost. And we're showing it through our society right now that almost all of the dads, if they are present in these movies and TV shows, they're typically fat. They're fat, they love sports, they sit around all day drinking almost excessively. Um, and it's very bizarre. Homer Simpson is like the perfect example of the male father today. He's dumb, he's rotund, he don't know anything about his kids. He's got a good heart. Don't get me wrong, Homer loves his kids, but he doesn't know shit about his kids. How many episodes have they done with Homer doesn't understand Lisa? Like, he eventually comes to understand Lisa later, but they've done that numerous times. Homer doesn't understand Lisa. How about Hank Hill from King of the Hill? Again, Hank is a stern guy, a masculine guy, but he's soft in the belly, and he doesn't understand his own son. And it's a very, very weird situation that we have this situation where our fathers in the media are always rotund and know nothing about their children. It's a it's yes, not abusive, but neglectful. In some ways, the father is almost positioned as being selfish. He cares more about what he wants for the kid than what the kid wants for themselves. And that's the King of the Hill situation right there, where Hank wants Bobby to be a certain way, you know, and Bobby can't be that way, or he's not that way. And Hank finds disappointment in that. Of course, they come to an understanding a little bit later, but Bobby he's a strangely emotional child, you know? So it's an interesting thing that I'm looking at here and noticing. And I think a lot of other people noticed it too. Especially, I'm not, the first person to ever point this stuff out. You know, it's even in, anime, sometimes you have parents who are not all the time attentive. Most of the time, parents aren't there when it comes to like shonen and stuff. But shonen dads tend to be a little bit invisible in some cases. Even when it comes to Dragon Ball, Goku isn't really the best father. He's present, he's on the screen all the time, but the interactions are a little awkward, they're a little weird. It's almost as if people forgot how to write fatherhood into media. We're not entirely sure what fatherhood is supposed to look like, you know? So it's an interesting thing. Let's go back to these guys.
What's his name? Phil Spector had some issues.
Yeah, that's coming up pretty soon on HBO. Or
yeah, I saw that. Yeah. But not to be outdone by your doll's hair. Don't worry about it.
No. Phil Spector. Phil Spector's on it. That's on a whole spectrum.
But the guys in the 70s, even before that, there was
Clint Eastwood was a badass.
Yes, and you had to be.
Yeah.
Or else you were Donald O'Connor.
But even if you go back
in films,
it'd be like Burt Lancaster, like John Wayne, Robert Mitchum.
Guys, right?
Right. You know.
Who today? Sean Penn, maybe. You could give Sean Penn that today.
Yeah, but Sean Penn's like 5'3".
Oh, but I don't think it's the height that matters. It's what comes across on camera. You just had the sense that they would fuck you up, and I think that was important back then. Now it's not. Now they have to be quite the opposite. They have to be very sensitive, very sensitive.
All right, now let's pause for a moment, because I don't agree or think that the men need to be huge and jacked like Schwarzenegger or Stallone. Because if you can watch The Godfather, again, these guys are covered for most of the movie. There are not really that many soft men in The Godfather. You know, like Pacino is short. He's not that big. But his ability to be masculine as Michael Corleone, it's shown in what way? Through his ability to control himself and to control others. You know, he yells in certain parts of the movie when he's really frustrated with his family and stuff like that. But he is serious. He's calculating. He's always thinking about what's in other people's best interest, not his own. You know, there's no workout. There's no training montage. So you have to show his masculinity in a different way. And this is the best way for them to show it, was for him to be, stoic. He wasn't unnecessarily overly sad, where, in movies that will come out later, like one of the things that we talked about is, was it Endgame? Avengers Endgame, when Thor's mother passes away and he gets all fat. When you talk to people about it and they say, well, his mom died. Of course, he got emotional. And I said to people, like, Thor's a god. He's lived for 3,000 years or something like that. People died in that time. And now all of a sudden he loses control of himself. He can't stop weeping. And like, that's not the character. That's not the character of Thor. And a lot of people felt that way when they did a comic book called The Unworthy Thor. And he was very self-reflective and self-depreciating because he had lost his ability to be worthy of the hammer. They were like, oh, he was all mopey and everything. I get it, but I liked the Unworthy Thor because he was still trying to prove himself. And it was about temptation, about, taking the easy way out of just picking up a different weapon and not proving himself to be worthy of his actual weapon, but just taking up another one just so he can have something. And he resisted that temptation. But the overly emotional nature of Thor in that movie was unbecoming, not only a masculine archetype, but a godlike character. It seemed nonsensical that he would just surrender to his emotions, overeat and cry and weep like some soft cupcake male character in, a TV show from the 1990s. It just doesn't make much sense, and it's very, very weird that we saw that, and that was the decision that they decided to make, when it goes to uh, superheroes. It was very weird. It was very, very weird. But the movie was made in like 2018, 2019 or something like that. So I'm not surprised that that's, the direction they chose to go in when it comes to this,
Sensitive, very sensitive and approachable, I think now is the, I had such a testy exchange. What is this? Popularity. Okay. You're going to have to zoom in here because I can't read anything. All right. Here are the top actors. We're saying the Star Meter has ranked these as the top film actors. Okay. Here's the Man of Steel. Does he look like the Man of Steel?
No.
No. He looks like he's on Kensington and Philly. Okay. Aaron Carter, right? Put him right up against Steve
Didn't
McQueen.
he just pass away?
Which is him or the brother?
Who the fuck is Aaron Carter?
No, it was Aaron Carter, right? He was the one.
Yeah, he just passed away.
Yeah, his brother. Who's his brother? The singer, Nick Carter.
God rest him.
Brendan Fraser.
Come on.
Fucking nobody up. Okay. I don't even know who this is, but are you kidding me? Louis Partridge. Okay.
Dominic West. I mean,
I would give him a shot in the ring, maybe. But just proving my point.
Ryan Hurst, he's kind of a big boy.
Yeah, but he's not a leading man type. He's like the Sons of Anarchy, and it's a niche. He's in that niche.
Where are they getting these guys at?
These are the top actors today, Kevin. Star Meter, top ranked actors in the world today.
That's not
Henry Cavill, for Christ's sake.
He's the Witcher. He just gave that role to.
This is funny. Like, I'm looking at this thing, and I really like Kevin Nash's podcast because he talks about stuff like this, pretty much all the time. But we are in a very interesting moment in time where, again, our children are inheriting a world where everybody is now substandard. Like, I can't complain about, growing up with like Fred Flintstone or Homer Simpson and, the Cosby Show and that kind of stuff because I was growing up in that. I never really considered it, that how standard it was for a lot of dads to be, or men for that matter, to be not positioned as being sort of masculine guys on television. But now I'm old enough to really notice it. I'm really, really noticing it now. James Earl Cash says, if you can make a TV show, what would you make it about? You know what? There's a lot of types of TV shows that I miss seeing. I was just on Twitter talking about something like American Gladiators. Like, it's a shame that we don't have anything like that today. Like what was those old shows like there was another sort of challenge show on Nickelodeon. It was like Temple of something or something, where you had to climb and run through these incredible traps and all this kind of stuff, and it was fun to watch. Now I know that there was some shows that kind of blew that whole thing up, and those things come out as sort of special events now, where if you can run across this teeter board without falling, they'll give you some money or whatever. But there should always be like an American Gladiators type of sports entertainment type of show, and that should always be present because people really enjoyed that, and I really enjoyed it and thought it was fun. The Titan Games was fine and all, but there should be something like that in constant rotation, And syndication was a beautiful thing back in the day because we could catch American Gladiators and stuff like that all the time on, a Saturday morning or something like that, and be able to pair that with pro wrestling, and you got, good. There were some strong women in that joint too, but there are some really masculine dudes in that thing too. Tough guys who were firm with their opponents, and you weren't just going to be a pushover. You were going to stand there, and things were going to be difficult for your competitors and stuff like that. It's a problem, but that's one of the things I will look at. I would look at sort of a throwback hard-boiled detective type of show, something that's along the same lines of Miami Vice or Magnum PI. You know, we need some stuff like that too. You know, you need some serious characters. Broken Skull Challenge is perfect. Yep, we needed something like that. We needed something like a Broken Skull Challenge. Um, and I'm trying to think of the show that kind of killed the American Gladiator style uh, TV show, but American Ninja Warrior was very fun. American Ninja Warrior was very fun. But those kind of challenge shows. I forget what they actually call. I'm about to look it up as I'm talking. But those kind of challenge type shows were fun. You know, they were really interesting, especially since people would often test themselves against these sorts of things. And it was a competition television program. That's what they called it. Um, competition television. It was a fun show, you know. And it's weird to me that people wouldn't just buy this stuff and just to put it on. Like, to me, WWE should buy the copyright to American Gladiators and run it alongside WWE on the network, like in syndication in perpetuity, just American Gladiator right next to WWE. And then, since they own it, they could take some of their smaller wrestlers who are not all of that well known and use them as gladiators in a reboot of American Gladiators. That would be fantastic. You know, it would be a great. I mean, that would be recognizing your brand, though. You know, recognizing that what your brand is and the kinds of things that people who are interested in your brand would want to participate in. It's like I may be the only person. I'm probably not the only person. I think there's bigger nerds than me. Who I walked through a Walmart once and I saw that Shawn Michaels, I'm talking Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, they did fitness videos. Like they did like workout videos. And I said to myself, like, that fits the WWE brand. You know, of course Vince was the WBF guy, right? You know, the World Bodybuilding Federation. Why wouldn't he be down for having a fitness brand? Not they own Tap Out, don't they? They could have an entire line of fitness gear if they wanted to. There's there's plenty of things that they could branch out into if they wanted to branch out that they could really help with, but they choose not to. And it's very, very bizarre that they would choose not to do that. Instead of, wasting money on the XFL or something like that, I'm talking American Gladiators would have been great. You know, a fitness brand would be great. You know, it would be something that would fit the brand. You know, they did a WWE combine. They did it one time where you get to see the kids in the performance center, whether they, how much they could lift, how fast they could run, all that sort of thing. And Bianca Belair came out of that thing looking like a star because she was tremendous in the combine. She was still in NXT at the time, but she wasn't even a regular on NXT. But she was in there and she was killing it. She was shutting it down in the combine. They should be doing combines pretty much every quarter. All the new people that they bring in, the NIL kids and the people they picked up from the indies and all that kind of stuff. I'm telling you, all these ideas are just free ideas. They could make money, and people will love to watch it. Tough Enough was perfect. They can never keep Tough Enough on TV regularly. It was weird that WWE can never keep Tough Enough on, but the Ultimate Fighter never fucking goes away. It never goes anywhere. And then there's Contender Series. It's exactly the same thing. You would think WWE would be smart enough to say, look, we were on the cutting edge of like reality TV, and look, change the format. They had no problem changing the format for like NXT, right? It was a game show at first, and then they changed the format. Change the format of Tough Enough. You know, it's that simple. But Tough Enough should never go away. But we're getting way off here to this. We're doing too much over here. We're supposed to be talking about masculinity in movies and TV shows, etc. Travis says the lack of masculinity in wrestling is probably why a lot of guys like Roman, because he reminds us of the tough guys from the past. Yes, Roman is a nice little. He's a nice bridge because he's something much like Randy Orton. He's a guy who exudes the WWE pretty boy archetype, but he's also big and exudes strength and especially strength of character and stuff like that. That gets some of the older people involved in it. He's not Goldberg, of course. Goldberg is classic pro wrestling. I'm talking Goldberg could work in any generation. You know, it probably wouldn't work today because again he's too masculine. They would say he's one dimensional. Sid. I'm telling you, if you were to do a a Powerpuff Girls like creation of a pro wrestler and you put in, the secret ingredient, it either out of the smoke would either come Randy Orton or Sid, and you win either way. Sid is fantastic. He's like a malfunctioning android. It's fantastic. I fucking love Sid. But yeah, it would be a perfect way to really get over what wrestling is now. And the reason I put Kenny Omega in the is because I think that he's the kind of guy that modern day wrestling fans who are not really tough guys and don't really care about, our era of masculinity. They don't really care too much about these guys. He's the kind of guy that they like. And it's not his fault. He's just being who he is. But here is Kenny Omega talking about his I hate to put it this way, his story of the Golden Lovers.
Sort of the lines of sexuality really opened the door to new fans in the LGBTQ community. Was this something that you set out to do at the very beginning? The message that you wanted to get out there? I just try to make my stories for everyone as best as I can, and I try to tell stories that are from my heart. And that just happened to be one that was very important to me, and I didn't want to shy away from it. And I felt that my biggest success in wrestling was when I told stories from the heart and when I performed from the heart. And since this was something that was on the forefront of my mind at the time, having someone that was very special to me that I couldn't even communicate with backstage or in public, when we finally were able to bring the Golden Lovers back in 2018, it was something just very special to me. And it was a story for me and for us, but to see that the fans really took so well to it and that it actually inspired some people really meant the world to me. And I'm so happy that the response has been so positive.
Yeah. Yeah. He likes telling stories from the heart, y'all. And what was on the forefront of his mind and on his heart was telling a pseudo homosexual story between him and Kota Ibushi. That's why he's on the thumbnail, right? Like, who the hell? You have to ask the question: who? We've been talking about men's, men's guys, athletes, soldiers, guys who don't mind getting into combative situations, strong guys. But it's all about sensitivity. It's all about inclusion, making other people happy and welcoming and all this. Like, when did that become something that we actually cared about? Why did we actually care about? And yeah, and this is an interesting thing that I know this is not G Coalition brother number 17's point, but was a guy who was the leader of an organization called the Bullet Club. The Bullet Club. Bullets, guns, sounds like a gang, tough guy stuff. And this guy is talking about being a golden lover. That doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. Nobody believes in this. Everybody looks at this guy and thinks this is a complete and total joke. Sure, it's inspiring to the LGBT, but how many people did it completely and totally alienate. I guess it doesn't matter though, right? You know, does it really? I guess it doesn't matter. You know, it seems to me that a lot of people are looking at this situation and saying to themselves, "Ugh, why would I want to be a fan of this guy who, dreams of kissing and all this kind of stuff other guys?" That's not something that they can relate to. Even other gay men are looking at that stuff and just kind of like, I I don't know what that. It's so weird. Um, it's odd, man. Uh, mm, yeah, it's. I respect the fearlessness of it. That it does take a lot of balls to kind of do that storyline, as a male wrestler. But uh, it doesn't quite get you in the room if all the guys are in here, doing guy shit, and you show up with your pseudo boyfriend. I guess you know, it's it's just weird. It's weird, and you put everybody else in a weird space. Um, and I'm not talking about conforming. That's why I say, it's a positive that you don't have to conform, but you should actually be a way through. Um, you should actually pay more attention to the room, like read the room. You know, this is a business of masculine guys, and then you come in here talking about being a golden lover with another guy. Kenny Omega was in a short play called the Sissy Slap Fight. I don't know if he was like in some kind of weird gay musical. I don't know, but he was definitely in a weird thing. And as far as I know, Kenny Omega is not an out homosexual. Everybody kind of assumes that he's a homosexual because he's like 40 with no mates at all, which is weird because he's famous. He's in that Queen Latifah situation where he's gay and everybody knows he's gay, but he won't say that he's gay. That's how the Brat was for a long time, where everybody's like, "Yeah, the Brat's gay." Oh no, this she's not gay. She never said she was gay, and then you find out that she's gay, and you were kind of like, "Are you surprised? Really?" It's like Kenny Omega's in that sort of ambiguous pile that's not really ambiguous. Like everybody knows this fucking guy's gay, but it's kind of like for some reason he can't say it out of his mouth that he's a homosexual or he's gay or whatever, which is weird. But I mean, everybody has their different battles that they need to fight, and he has a situation where I guess he just can't say it out of his mouth yet, or he wants to keep dropping context clues until everybody gets the picture. But it's weird. But oh, okay. AJ3 says men don't cry as well. When the last time you saw a grown man cry in Hollywood and in real life? Well, I work in a mental hospital, so I see grown men cry all the time. They get very emotional. Some of them have depression. Some of them are just very, very frustrated. They get upset. So I see grown men cry all the time, but they're not the most emotionally balanced individuals. Like I saw a guy who doesn't have like a serious mental illness sit down and cry. It's been a while. It's been a while, but um, we, it's just a really odd situation. Uh, Vegeta Lover thinks Kenny Omega is having sex with Japanese girls. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. So, well, I hope he is having sex with the Japanese girls, and that the ones that he are having sex with are over the age of 18 at least. Because Japan will bring a girl in, she'd be fresh out of high school, and throw her in the middle of a ring, or sometimes she'll be 14 or something like that. I'm telling you, they really just snatch those girls off the street and turn them into wrestlers. It's very weird stuff. But um, we definitely need to uh, look at this situation and say that actors have gotten soft, and therefore a lot of the movies have gotten soft. You know, the guy used to get the girl through his actions, through playing the masculine role. He was charming. He was a protector. He took care of her, and she fell for that. Now it's all fancy, elaborate poems and playing music outside of, all that kind of stuff, outside of her house and all that shit. It was really weird. G Coalition Brother says, I didn't give a fuck that Kenya was bi until he took over from AJ Styles and started showing everybody what his vision really is. I didn't even know that he was bi at that time. Because, I'm not that well versed in the Kenny Omega Japan lore. I know the greatest hits. I know all that stuff. But I didn't care to think too much about his relationship with Kota Ibushi. When I heard about the Golden Lovers, and I just kind of looked at that and was like, you probably wouldn't do that unless you legitimately felt some way about it. And, a lot of the sissy slot fight stuff, it's like you putting the puzzle together, like whether he's gay or not is irrelevant. But I just kind of wrote him off. Like I said, he's in that Queen Latifah camp where he's gay until he says otherwise or confirms. So I just kind of like, okay, it is what it is. So that's really all I had for you guys. I still managed to do it in under an hour. So I really don't have anything else to talk about. You guys can go back to watching your Fool's Bowl, your Super Bowl, if you would like. So unless y'all have something you want to talk about specifically, we can start wrapping it up. But I did suggest everybody watch Bullet. It's an excellent movie. Steve McQueen is a tough police officer in that movie. It says a lot too that a lot of these movies, the guys who were the tough guys were also in positions of authority. Like James Bond is, has a license to kill. He's not necessarily a position of authority, but he comes across like a man who's in control. He's a law enforcer. He fights terrorists and, evil scientists and stuff like that. But you look at something like Clint Eastwood. He played a sheriff most of the time. Sometimes he played the outlaw with a heart of gold or something like that, but he often was the sheriff. Steve McQueen, police officer. Magnum PI, he was a private detective, but he was always on the side of good. It's weird. Shouldn't be that much of a surprise that as we degraded masculinity, we also degraded the concept of, authority being seen as a positive. Somebody who's in control being seen as a positive, being a positive in that situation. I definitely saw that. WG Phil, did you see Tim Pool finally cracking over the Eliza Blue situation? Yes. I saw his tweets. I saw a lot of that stuff. I'm gonna be honest. I don't really think Tim's going to retire, quote unquote. He may take a step back for a while and let this whole thing blow over before making a triumphant return. But I think he's mostly just frustrated. He's been dealing with this stuff pretty routinely every couple of weeks now. He's been getting bombarded with, people attacking him, coming after him. And that's the cost of, being successful. Tim is a very successful guy. There's a lot of people who are jealous about that. There's a lot of people who just don't like his content, which is fine. I don't watch every Tim Pool video, but I know haters when I see it. I know when people just hate Tim because they hate him. There's some people who legitimately just disagree with him, and that's cool. I enjoy that people disagree, but then there's generally people who just hate Tim, because Tim has the audacity to be successful. Then there's a lot of people who are jealous, and Tim dealt with a lot of stuff. That's what I feel bad for him about, because the moment he became like super famous, he started losing friends, like left and right. People who he worked with for years and years started turning on him. He got sued by two people that he hired. They stole a bunch of equipment. They tried to overthrow him and kick him out of his own company. Then Adam drops like a 6-hour video over him. His sister has attacked him. He's gotten into it with his brother. He's constantly being called out by other content creators for literally not covering stories the way that they want him to. It's like there's a lot of little things that I can respect that Tim tried to sidestep, and usually he's bullied into finally talking about this stuff. And he still continues to try to be neutral on it instead of taking the nuclear option and just nuking these people from orbit with his big channel, which is what he could do. And I give him credit for, not trying to, expose or alienate too many people. But at the same time, if Tim was a stronger guy, he would not be in these situations that often. But there's something to be said about when you become successful, people decide they can make money doing quote unquote exposés, writing books, doing stories about you or whatever. And every time you are involved in something, it's turned on its ear. Like Tim has nothing to do with Eliza Blue. Not really. He had her on the show twice. Not too many people even know who she is. He was right in that. If you want to discuss it from a free speech issue, that's fine. You can do that. But there's, again, hundreds and dozens of other people who are talking about the same subject. If he has nothing to add, he has nothing to add. But these people apparently want him to apologize or something like that for having her on the show. As far as I know, he doesn't even book his own guests. He has somebody who does that for him. So he's in a situation here where he's basically was being told to do certain things that he didn't want to do. And the final blow up was, somebody said they were going to pull their money from his sites, or they were giving him super chats trying to get him to talk about something he didn't want to talk about. And that finally caused him to crack. And he was like, I don't do this for the money. You can't just dangle money in front of me and expect me to dance, which I respected. I respected that he didn't do that. But I still do think he should have said something about it, because she was literally on his show not that long ago, talking about being sex trafficked and all that kind of stuff. So, and I watched PSA Sitch and Adam talk about it, and that was a good point that they made. That, Tim helped make Eliza Blue a big deal, so he should have some kind of response on it. But at the same time, everybody's calling her a fake or calling her a phony. But each time they do that, it's a situation in which they're saying, well, we can't prove that it didn't happen. It's like, okay, well, until you can prove it, he's want to stay out of it. That's perfectly fine too. Everybody should have just minded their own business. Tim don't want to talk about it. You talk about it. The Quartering is a guy who has 1 million subscribers, if I'm correct. Why shouldn't he just talk about it? If he want to beat that drum, he can. It shouldn't be anybody else's responsibility to cover the same stories everybody else is covering. I support Tim and his ability to do whatever the fuck he wants to do and not be a slave to his audience. And the response that he gave, that there was a PR firm that was pushing Eliza Blue, that's bullshit. Now we know that, that's bullshit. But the truth of it is, a lot of the stuff that was coming across onto his chat and all that sort of thing, it was completely fugazi. It was completely artificial. But it was coming from other content creators who were calling out Tim for not talking about it. That's really should have been what he did. Is a lot of these people are coming from the Quartering, they're coming from Brittany Venti, they're coming from all of these places telling Tim to talk about this subject. And instead of Tim saying, look, you're a follower, a lot of people who follow my channel, they're not interested in that kind of stuff. It's a free speech issue, maybe, but we don't know what's going on really. We're going to keep, our separate ways, or this is a situation these guys want to talk about, and not getting into the muck and the mire of it. But him saying it was a PR firm and he's going to have some reporter write an article on it, and the guy wrote like an 80,000 word article. It was ridiculous. I mean, this thing is not that important. It's like, really, that's the one thing that I say I agree with Tim on, is Eliza Blue is not that important. Tim is talking about like State of the Union. He's talking about inflation. He's talking about some really real situations that affect people in real life. And you want to talk about some chick who decided she wanted to, go at Eliza Blue on Twitter and got banned. It's like, that's unfortunate, but we're talking about more serious things over here. You guys want to talk about something else? You feel free to do so. We're going to talk about something else over here. And he should have just said that, and then left it at that. But the audience and their desire to try to force people into doing things they don't want to do, I sympathize that Tim is being brigaded and how he feels constantly under attack. So he might want to take a step back every once in a while to get some air because he's under attack from all sides. He's under attack from the left constantly. He's under attack from the right constantly. Even though he has apparently a little bit more support from people on the right. But I feel bad for him, but at the same time, that's the cost of being successful. He's a successful guy. This is the kind of thing you have to deal with. Everybody who's ever known you is going to be out for how they can make a buck. Either they can make a buck from borrowing from you or talking about you. So it is what it is. So, Tim did the work to get successful, but now other people are trying to take the elevator to success using his name. And it's unfair, but that's just kind of how the American society is. That's how YouTube works. People will make as much money as they can talking about you if they have to. And it is what it is. He's got to learn how to deal with it. He's been dealing with this for like 10 years now. It should be no surprise now, So it is what it is. Tim is the only lefty to call out the left on their BS. He's not the only one. Jimmy Dore does it. There's David Pakman does it sometimes. The issue is that Tim tries to play the middle and he ends up getting attacked from both sides. He's not left enough for the left. He's not right enough for the right. So he's constantly being attacked. But I think what bothered him mostly is the personal nature of these attacks. How people are constantly attacking his friends, his relationships. People are constantly talking about his personal life. Like the Eliza Blue thing led to people putting out videos of the first time she was on the show when Adam was there. So there's people who got backstage footage of Tim and his crew hanging out with Eliza Blue, and they're drunk and partying and everything. And I'm saying to myself, like, what does any of this got to do with what you guys claimed you have a problem with? You claim you have a problem that this woman is on TV lying about being sex trafficked. But now we've gone from that to she was on Blind Date. She was on a video vixen. She was this, she was that. It's like none of that means anything unless you have like some solid evidence that what she says occurred did not occur. And each person keeps saying, well, we can't prove it. But it's like, well, now you're just talking shit. You just don't like her. And that's fine. But you can't expect him to care that you don't like her. And you can't expect him to have the same reaction to this same subject that you have. So it's very unfair. But that's the position he finds himself in. It's unfortunate. And you would think people who will be kind of natural supporters of Tim, finding Tim's silence very suspicious, which, it is. At the same time, though, he can't cover everything. And this is not a big enough issue that it needs to be discussed so much. It's like I don't see that much of anything being changed because you don't like Eliza Blue. It's like, okay, well, now I guess he got to go after Elon Musk, who apparently is a benefactor of hers and is the reason she's been getting people banned from Twitter or whatever. And that's something he should probably do because he did go after Twitter for unnecessary bannings before. But, that's a choice that he made, back when Twitter was a lot worse than it is now. But I feel bad for him. It's a situation that he finds himself in that, there was not really that much in the way of an answer because he doesn't want to discuss it. He don't want to deal with it. He doesn't want to get involved with beef between content creators. That's exactly what this is. Eliza Blue creates content. She says stupid things. She recently went on TV or an ANCAP show talking about minors being able to have sexual attraction to adults and all this kind of stuff. It's like, this isn't a serious person. Why are we spending so much time talking about this broad? You know, and people have turned her into a personality, and it's weird, but I feel bad for him, really. Yes, Tim is the beanie guy. He's the beanie hat man. Yeah, that's pretty much what he's known for. But he's a competent YouTuber. He's really trying to push everything forward. Talking about current events and everything. But um, to me, Eliza Blue hit the wall. She's not as hot as she used to be. She was fire. She was the second coming of Amber Rose back in her day, which was about a decade ago when she was in music videos and stuff like that. She's older now. She's and she's grifting. You know that part is true. So despite the fact that I sound like I don't like the quartering and all that kind of stuff, they're not wrong. She is a grifter. She is a grifter. It's absolutely true that she's a grifter. But that's not his responsibility to talk about her being a grifter. He's saying that she's not a serious person. Nobody cares about her. And I think that's an important point. And it's also an important point that if he just doesn't want to talk about it, he shouldn't have to. Whether he has personal relationships with her or not is irrelevant. He shouldn't have to talk about somebody he doesn't want to talk about. Darren Gordon Hill says, I never heard about her before this stream. Heard of the others you mentioned multiple times, places. Yeah. Eliza Blue isn't this big star. She was on Tim's show twice. The second time she was on his show, she was talking about Andrew Tate, and she had a letter supposedly from an Andrew Tate victim. And she was talking about her experiences being sex trafficked, which of course is likely bullshit. But that's where everything started, because Brittany Venti decided she wanted to try to out Eliza Blue as being a video vixen and a grifter, because apparently that matters. And that's where everything started. Because as soon as she posted that video, that screenshot, she got her taken off Twitter. She got attacked. And from there, the quartering jumped in, and everybody's been running back and forth since then. And the quartering is now in the middle of something else. I mean, with the Sydney Watson lawsuit against the Blaze, he's smack dab in the middle of that too, because he does a live stream with Sydney Watson pretty much every week. Funny how that keeps happening. That, the general drama YouTubers are constantly in the middle of fucking drama. It's weird, man. But at least I can say, because I think the quartering is legitimately on the right. I think Sydney Watson is legitimately on the right. But it's an odd situation, because they're not right wing enough to me. I may like some of their takes, and they may stumble across some good stuff every once in a while, but generally speaking, they don't spit enough fire for me. AJ3 doesn't like bald women. I'm not a huge fan of bald women. Shorter hair is fine. It depends on how it looks on her. But bald, typically no. The Amber Rose tennis ball head, not a big fan of that. Not a big fan of that at all. Travis Tippins is 100% correct. Life is far too short to be constantly wrapped up in drama. But when you're a general drama YouTuber, you have a financial incentive to be wrapped up in drama all the time. So you're going to constantly hear these same people are involved with beef and constantly involved with getting banned from Twitter or on the threat of losing their channel, because this is what they do. They jump in on both feet to any kind of drama because it's an opportunity to do a 6-hour live stream about it and make some money. And not to add anything to the discussion, really, but just get as much attention on themselves as they possibly can, so that they can then, skate off with super chats and that kind of stuff, which is the general trend that YouTube is going towards, is that people are moving more towards, away from actually making content and more towards how can I attack somebody, get them to attack me, get them to talk about me. And especially if it's a bigger channel, How can I get them to talk about me? Put attention on me, and I can make more money. And if I can start beef with somebody who's got a bigger channel and run off some of his fans, then I'll get more fans. They've been doing that stuff for years. During the Baked Alaska days, the Blood Sports days, that was basically the same thing. The Debate Me Bros, all that kind of stuff was the same shit. It's just the same shit, different pot. Let's put it like that. Different toilet. It's just on the right now. The right wing YouTubers are trying to cut each other down, and Steven Crowder and Daily Wire now is, the Blaze is next. It's going to be pretty. Project Veritas is having their internal struggles and all this kind of stuff. All of this stuff at one time. It's very suspicious, if you ask me. But I'm a conspiracy theorist, and I don't believe in conspiracy. I don't believe in coincidences. Not in certain realms. I don't believe that the Blaze is having internal problems, that Project Veritas is having internal problems, that Tim is having all these problems, and all of this stuff is happening at the same time. And it's all a coincidence. I don't believe that. The Daily Wire having their problems, and all this stuff is happening all at the same time. I don't believe that. That's just me, though. All right, you guys go back to your football game. We're not really talking about nothing here. I've been rambling for about 20 minutes on YouTube drama on the right, which to me says a lot because it's all TMZ stuff. Yeah, Darren Gordon Hill is correct. Once it's a happenstance, twice is a coincidence, thrice is an enemy action. You have a lot of, especially big time right wing channels like the Blaze being hit with a lawsuit. The Daily Wire just got attacked. They're probably going to lose tons of subscribers. Steven Crowder is going to lose a bunch of subscribers. Tim is about to lose a bunch of subscribers. And it's all happening all at the same time. At a very important time in American history where inflation is crazy and people want to talk about politics and they want information, and all of this stuff starts to happen. It's very weird that all of this is occurring. And to me, that's the important part. That's the story, is how all of this stuff is happening. Who is happening to and why? Kind of a shrug. I thought you thought I was talking about Keemstar. Nah, I don't know that much about Keemstar, except for maybe I think he's also a general drama YouTuber. A lot of these guys are becoming general drama YouTubers. Elijah, is there any black capitalist I can listen to? Listen to Eric July. He's a black libertarian. He's also a capitalist. He's also pretty smart. Anthony Brian Logan is a black Republican. He's a conservative. He's not always right, but he takes up for capitalism quite often. Pretty smart guy. Let's see. Glenn, I'm trying to remember his last name. He does what is his name? Glenn Lowry. He does a podcast. Well, he did. I don't know if he continues to do one with John McWhorter. They're brilliant black professors. There's tons of guys. Hotep Jesus is another one. He does a great show. How many more can I think of? I'm trying to avoid people who are like a Candace Owens. Like, nobody wants to listen to Candace Owens. Nobody likes her, man. Like, she legitimately is very famous, and like almost nobody likes her. I like how dogged she can be when she actually knows what she's talking about. She can be very loud and very vicious, which is very important sometimes, because the right comes across as being a little too reserved, and they end up getting ripped apart because the left will interrupt and yell and cuss and everything. They don't do that with Candace. They don't play that game with her because she comes out like a dragon. But the problem is, she comes out, sometimes jumps out her square. She doesn't know what she's talking about, and she just sounds like a nut. So it's a 50, actually not even 50-50. It's more like a 80-20 rule with Candace Owens. Like 80% of the time she's a nut job. 20% of the time she's on point. Roland Martin is not the one. He's not the one. He sucks. I like Jason Whitlock too. He's more of he's a culture warrior too. he sits on the front line of sports and culture. He doesn't necessarily go on and on about capitalism, but if you're a Christian, he's a really good proponent of Christianity. Um, and he often critiques sports and different things like that from a Christian perspective. And I like having the Christian perspective, there because it gets you something to think about. Like his critique of Matt Walsh's "What Is a Woman." He was able to critique that show or that documentary, not from the position that it was wrong, but that he felt that Matt Walsh didn't use the Bible enough in his refutation of the leftist position of what a woman is. He felt like it should have been more rooted in Christianity. And I feel like that's an important thing. He also talks a lot about masculinity, which is another thing. Why I'm starting to move more into that space too. Talking about masculinity and masculine role models and different things like that. And athletes are used to be top masculine role models, and that they're not anymore. They're now more brands. Like LeBron James isn't known as being a good man. He's now a strong brand. Everything about LeBron James is meticulously put together. Every time you see LeBron James holding a book, he's on the first page. You know, everything about it is meticulous and fake. And certain people don't do a good job of calling it out. But Jason Whitlock knows enough about sports to be able to call out the fakeness of the athletes. And I enjoy paying attention to that. I can enjoy a product even if I don't know anything about it. That's why I kind of liked the quartering at first, because he was talking about Dungeons and Dragons. I didn't know anything about Dungeons and Dragons, but it was interesting hearing him talk about it. Then he went far to a different direction, and whatever. Yes, Matt Walsh in his defense, he was trying to say he wanted it to be, he didn't want it to refute it from the position of using the Bible. And to be in Matt Walsh's position, he was correct. If he'd have said, "This is what the Bible says," now you have to argue the Bible. You have to argue everything that's in it. You'd be sitting there arguing about the Bible, or they would reject everything you say because you use the Bible as a source. Which is a legitimate position. So he made a decision to not argue based on the Bible. And you could critique that, which Jason Whitlock did, but I don't think that makes Matt Walsh wrong. I think that he was doing so to try to argue that the left is irrational. And Whitlock wanted to say you should be pushing Christian fundamentalism and that kind of stuff, which is fine. But I like the way Matt Walsh did it. I didn't have a problem with it. So I don't have a problem with that. It says the Bible is about. It gives foundation for opinions. It said, what is Matt Walsh's foundation? Well, his foundation is the Bible. He just didn't use the Bible in arguing, what is a woman, because he's using the left's rationality. He's trying to utilize their own foundation to establish a foundation that they can just define terms in any ways that they want. He didn't use his own, really. He kind of used theirs. And saying, like, what is a woman? And they say, well, a woman is anybody who, what's the word that they use? A woman is anyone who feels as if they're a woman or whatever the hell. It's nonsense. But that's what he was trying to argue with. He was trying to argue using their logic and showing how their logic does not stand up to critique. But it makes sense. But you can't go, if you try to turn it into a sermon, people will reject it. And you're dealing with a lot of leftists here. So in order to get those people to participate and to sit down and do interviews and all that kind of stuff and be on television, and to be able to get the documentary done, he decided that he wasn't going to use the Bible as a foundation for his knowledge, even though his belief in what is a woman is based off of the Bible. Whatever happened to David Harris Jr.? I see him on Twitter a lot. I don't know if there's anything that happened to him. I don't know if anything happened to him. I never really watched his channel anyway, so I don't really know. But yeah, Darren, they are bigots, you know. But that's the point. You hold them to their standards because you show they don't have any standards, you know. But basically, he was trying to show them that their logic is circular and it doesn't work. And you could tell that the documentary wasn't for Christian right wingers like Jason Whitlock. The documentary was for people who might be sensitive to what the left is peddling, but since they cannot argue from a position of um, solid based logic that basically is based off of flighty, ever changing, ever twisting definitions of words, that you can't really take what they're saying seriously, because a woman could be a chair at that point. If a chair could speak, which they can't. You have to be woman by declaration, not by biology, which is very strange. But he used a biological argument. But if you believe God made human beings, and then you believe in science, because God made science, right? How else do we reproduce? So it's an interesting things to get people over and to try to strike a victory. But I definitely understand why Jason Whitlock went after him the way that he did. That's like I understand why he went after Patrick Bet David recently for trying to pull a bait and switch on the whole Roland Martin thing. He was 100% right to do that. Somebody tricking you to coming down to Florida, then trying to turn it into a debate. Like, oh hell no. It's ridiculous, bro. Like, I really support a lot of this stuff, man. I pay attention to a lot of this stuff too. But if you're interested in black capitalism, I'm telling you, Walter Williams is excellent, and Thomas Sowell is excellent. There's another, I believe it's Shelby Steele. He's mostly into culture, not necessarily economics, but he's also pretty good too. There's quite a few guys. There's quite a few guys that are, black and into capitalism that produce pretty good content. Just like there's a lot of black guys who are into the Second Amendment. They make some pretty good content too. Let's see. Darren Gordon Hill, and they're still in schools having tranny time, but at least Matt Walsh owns some libs. Well, your issue is to think that was going to stop if he'd used the Bible. That wasn't going to stop. There was nothing he's going to be able to do that's going to be able to stop that. So I don't think that's a good argument. Like, oh yeah, he smashed the libs, but guess what? They're still doing the drag queen story hour in the schools. Like, yeah, they weren't going to stop doing that anyway. They were doing it before he did the documentary. They were going to continue doing it. He just showed the hypocrisy of it, and that they can't really define what a woman is, and that a lot of them are pedophiles. Which you have to set up the trap. You have to know what bait to use to get the trap, to set the trap. The Bible ain't the right belt. It ain't the right bait. Those guys are going to reject that, and they're not really going to participate, and you're never going to get to talk to anybody, and you're going to end up in a circle arguing against the same people over and over again. It would have been nice if Peter actually went after some of the leftists in the church that are now starting to buy into the whole feminist bullshit that's in the Catholic Church and stuff like that. That would have been a nice position to take up and to go after those people for that, but it would have been nice. Do I think progressive politics is a fad? I think a lot of their beliefs are fads, but they do a good job of attaching their beliefs to celebrities. By having celebrities parrot the things that they say, it's a really interesting thing. you know by forcing it on the NBA and the NFL and that kind of stuff, yeah, it's going to get cringe. And you would think in 2 or 3 decades we will look back at it and say it was a horrible ideology, but that's assuming that the right wins. That's assuming that the right wins. Think about 2 or 3 decades ago against things that we look at now, and say, wow, those things were wrong. For instance, one of the things that we constantly get into arguments about is crime, right? So tough on crime. One of the things that we talk about a lot today. Maj Toure was talking about it on Twitter. Sonny Johnson talks about it. A lot of the black Republicans who maintain their sort of racial collectivism, they talk about it a lot. Police brutality, quote unquote, over policing, all these sorts of things, right? If you were an adult in the 1980s and the 1990s, you know about the gang problem, the crack cocaine problem, the drug issue, and you know that a lot of older black people who didn't want to live in crime-riddled communities, they wanted the tough on crime legislation. One of the arguments that you would often see if you go back and read books and things like that on the subject, read the newspaper, look at the news articles, etc., a lot of older black people were like, hey, they're turning our neighborhoods into open air drug dens. They're ruining the communities. They're breaking up families. They're killing our sons because they're getting shot. They're joining gangs. They're getting murdered. Somebody needs to do something. So then the government stepped in and they started doing tough on crime legislation. You started doing 3 strikes rules in California, mandatory crack minimums, et cetera, et cetera. And from there, you started having the crime rate go down because a lot of people were being arrested and taken off the street. At the same time, though, guys were getting football numbers for their first drug offense. So this was in the early to mid 90s. Now here it is in the 2020s, and you're talking about how it was a terrible policy because all of these black men who got arrested, and now all the prisons are mostly black male, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, but this is what the people of the time wanted. The people of that time wanted the police to go in there and arrest a bunch of people who were dealing crack, to really throw heavy numbers at gangs and hitting them up with RICO charges and all that kind of stuff. That's what they wanted. They wanted safer neighborhoods. The cost of that was to get rid of and break up a lot of the gangs and a lot of the drug dealers, etc. But in the 30 years since then, the drug dealer has found a lot of sympathy in the left. That he was trying to take care of his family, through rap music, through movies and TV shows, etc., showing the drug dealer as some poor, put upon black guy who, how dare you ask him to go cut grass or bag groceries or whatever. The only way he can make money is by selling dope. So over 30 years, that argument vanished. It disappeared. People forgot that there used to be older black people and politicians, etc., who were tired of the funerals, who were tired of people being killed, who were tired of the Bloods and the Crips and the Latin Kings and all this bullshit going on in various urban areas, because that stuff doesn't really exist as much today as it did then. So now people are kind of like, well, it was a bad problem. It was a problem. It was racism. It's still racism. It's always been racism. And it's like, no, this is a lot of what these people wanted at the time, and it was a progressive position that we were going to, that they used to say that it was racist that the cops didn't arrest the drug dealers, that they wanted the neighborhoods to fall apart. You could go back and look at the Al Sharptons and the Jesse Jacksons and all these kind of guys, and now we're back to soft on crime, where these guys are out here murdering each other, killing each other, and then they're right back out on the street, and the crime rate is going back up, and the murders are going back up, and you got open air drug dens all over again, and it's going to be a cycle, And if you say, "Hey, we need to start arresting people," well, you're a racist. Is we're constantly doing this back and forth because people have no cultural memory. It's this constant football of left and right. And it's usually the left constantly moving further and further to the left. And the right trying to stop it, but also having no cultural authority whatsoever. And they're scared to death of being called a racist, so they won't, actually force the laws to be implemented. So everybody has their own laws and nothing matters anymore. But that's just one of the things that when people say to me in 20 or 30 years, we're going to think that this was silly, it's like there used to be things we used to think was silly all the time. The welfare queen used to be a myth, quote unquote, right? It was never a myth, by the way. But people used to think it was a myth that people sat around all day doing drugs and collecting welfare and they didn't want to work. And then, now we have a welfare society where help. Some people are on welfare and they do work, but now they work in, Walmart part time and they can't make any money. But you do also have a lot of people who sit around all day collecting benefits. They don't add anything to society. You know, we have expanded things like Medicare and Medicaid. We have expanded a lot of the welfare programs to include pretty much everybody. Everybody except a 22-year-old white male is basically available for Medicaid now. It's but it's not that bad. I'm exaggerating, of course. But we always say that in a few years we will look back on this as being silly, but in a few years it just continues. Affirmative action was another one. Affirmative action was only supposed to last for a short amount of time. Affirmative action has been around for 50 years now, and we just keep adding more people to affirmative action. It went from affirmative action for black people to affirmative action for women, then affirmative action for gays, now affirmative action for trannies. Now in the future it's going to be affirmative action for pedophiles. Who knows? Because it started out, it's mission creep. It keeps being these small things that we say it's not going to be a big deal, or man, I can't wait till this is over. And then in 20 years, it's still there. We used to think that people were going to grow out of being a leftist. That, oh, you can be a leftist in college, because that's always been the case. As soon as you go out into the real world's going to snap you into being a conservative, because you're going to try to get a house. You're going to try to, start seeing your tax rates go up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What ended up happening is all of the leftists who ended up graduating from college ended up changing their society to the left, making things worse for themselves, and then blaming the right for it. That's exactly what happened. You know, all the black people of Detroit took over Detroit and then blamed all the white people when it started to suck. It had nothing to do with them being black, of course, but it was 100% black leftists. They took over the cities. They took over Baltimore and Oakland and Detroit and so many other cities. It's black people all up and through that joint, all up and through the police department, the city council, the mayor's office, etc. But it's almost always the sort of pseudo intelligent uber left blacks, and then they run out everybody. They talk about how terrible everybody, all the other races are. So those people leave, and now it's those people's fault that black folks ain't got shit. It's a terrible system, man. But we keep going through these cycles because it's easy. The people who write the history books and the people who teach the classes and all of them, they like to pass the buck on to Thomas Sowell said something I think was very intelligent, where he said the right has no definition. Like the right is whatever the left doesn't like. That's what the right is in the United States. The right is whatever the left decide they don't like. So, the definition of fascism has become whatever right wingers are for. It doesn't, what the actual definition of fascism is far closely related to what the left wants, but they have decided that they write the books. They decide what fascism is, and they decided that fascism is a right wing thing, and therefore everybody is a fascist. And they can do that and they've tried to put a pretty face on communism, and they've been doing this stuff for 40 years. And so many people are not going to be able to fix it, because so many people are not sure what the hell they're talking about. or how to properly debate these subjects. Like, it's amazing to me. And the right keeps doing this to themselves. Like the Steven Crowder and Daily Wire thing, and now the Sidney Watson Blaze situation goes to show that the right has been home to essentially leftists from the beginning. People who have quote unquote right wing values in so much as they're Christians who don't want their religion assaulted, but generally speaking, they're leftists on pretty much everything else. You know, they're leftists in terms of economics. They want to have a social safety net because they don't want, their grandparents or whatever to not have social security or whatever the fuck. And, they believe in discrimination law, and then they'll actually use discrimination law against you and all this sorts of stuff. Nothing is right wing in culture anymore. There is no right wing culture. It's all just basically your ability to react. Even the corporations are leftist, and they've been progressive for a long time because the government showed you way back in the 40s and 50s that if the government wants to take control of a corporation, they will do it. The CEO of Montgomery Ward got arrested by the federal government. The federal government pretty much took over General Motors and turned them into a artillery making machine, during World War II. And this is pretty much something that is lauded for them. You got FDR, who is the guy who did the Japanese internment camps. He's a hero to the left. But you're not supposed to know that he was the guy who locked up the Japanese and that kind of stuff. He was the guy who set up the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That he was a flaming racist. Because they write the books. They say FDR is a hero. It's just, it is what it is, man. You have to realize that if you're a Republican, you're fucked. And then the Republican Party doesn't help you at all. Think about how many Republicans are scared to death to stand up against something like the Civil Rights Act. Like you should read "Conscience of a Conservative" by Barry Goldwater. He lays out in "Conscience of a Conservative" why he was against the Civil Rights Act. And when you read it, well, if you have principles, you should already know why he was against the Civil Rights Act. But a lot of people claimed that they were principled, that they cared about the Constitution and all this kind of stuff, but they will not stand up and say they're against the Civil Rights Act. The Civil Rights Act was the most poisonous piece of legislation ever put forth. That is a fact. It allowed the federal government to take over private industries. How so? Through the Civil Rights Act, now the federal government can tell you that you have to bake cakes for people you don't want to bake cakes for. Because under the Civil Rights Act, if you own a business, you are not really in control of that business. Then you may say, oh, but private property exists. Well, allow me to explain. If somebody tells you who you can hire, how many of them you can hire, what you have to do, when you have to do it, how much you have to pay them, when you have to pay them, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, who is in control? You or them? If there's laws governing every stitch of your company, from the labels on the bottles to which way the door swings, are you in control or are they in control? And you can say, well, that's not what the Civil Rights Act does. The Civil Rights Act says that if you provide public accommodations, you must treat everybody essentially the same, right? That's a violation of the rights of the individual. I should be able to, if I want to be biased against, I don't know, let's say white people. I don't want white people in my store for whatever reason. That should be my business, because it might not be, I may make exceptions from time to time if I wanted to. You're telling me I have to serve people I don't want to serve. And now what happens? Now here it is 50, 60 years later or whatever, somebody decides they're a tranny, they want a tranny cake, and this guy who makes cakes now have to make tranny cakes and he don't want to. So who's in control? Him or the state? He's a fucking slave to the state, and it's because of the Civil Rights Act. You know, through legislation, they have controlled every piece of private business. Through regulations, of course, has controlled pretty much every piece of private business. The Civil Rights Act just controls the company. Now, you can be sued if you have too many men in your business. In California, they're saying that they're going to mandate women have to join your board. Who's in control of your company at that point? You or the state? If the state tells you you have to hire women, are you in control or are they in control? If the state tells you you've got too many white people in your college, who's in control, you or them? You've got too many men. You've got too many white people. You've got too many of X, Y, and Z. Even if it's not by design, even if it's by complete accident, because you set certain standards. And the Civil Rights Act has become a cultural thing. It's not just a legality issue now. Now it's cultural. You can sue people for stuff now. You can sue people for pretty much anything now. I said this before. I was talking about events. These whole things now is that it starts out small, but it becomes big. Mission creep was a real thing. They took something that was serious, which is men proposing quid pro quo sex for jobs towards women, to the point where if you look at a woman wrong, you're subject to a lawsuit. It's ridiculous, man. It's gotten really, really ridiculous. But the Civil Rights Act has been devastating for the right of individual sovereignty and public property and those sort of things. The Civil Rights Act has been destructive for that. But you can't get rid of it. No conservative or libertarian. Well, the libertarians maybe, because they're kind of psychos. But there's no conservatives who are willing to stand up and say we need to repeal the Civil Rights Act. They need to stand up and say we need to repeal the 19th Amendment. We need to stop. Some people on the right are willing to stand up and say not everybody should vote. Which is another thing. You have taxation without representation, which people think is a human rights abuse, which, is true. You can't keep taking things from people and not offering them a seat at the table. At the same time, though, now they want illegal immigrants to vote because illegal immigrants pay taxes. They don't pay income tax. They pay sales tax, though. So now that California and somewhere else and a bunch of other places are like, oh, we want illegal immigrants to vote. It's wrong for them to have taxation without representation. They should be able to vote. Oh, wow. Look what you've done. Look at what you've done by saying that everybody should vote. You now created a system where people who aren't even from your country are not going to be voting in your elections. It's ridiculous. But nobody who has the balls to stand up and say something against it. Very fringe level conservatives who are very active on Twitter and YouTube, they'll talk about it. But once you get into the halls of government, certain things are a no-go. You're not going to be able to get anybody to say we need to repeal the 19th. We need to repeal the Civil Rights Act. These things need to go. We need to repeal taxes. We need to just completely eliminate the income tax. The federal income tax especially needs to go away. Property taxes need to go away. But you can't get people. It is easier to get people, like the left can envision a world in which men and women are completely and totally, interchangeable. There's no difference between men and women. They can envision that world. They can envision a world where, animals have all the same rights as human beings, where the government can control what kind of cars you drive and, where you live and whether your landlord can evict you from your property, et cetera, et cetera. But they cannot envision a world where they don't have to pay taxes. Isn't that weird? How weird is it that they cannot envision a world where kicking up 30% of what you own to the state is not a viable thing to do? People will believe that folks who have never met them are the reason why they're broke. It's easier to get black people to believe that it's white people's fault they don't have any money. They don't have any response. They don't have any jobs. They don't have any opportunities. It's easy to get black people to believe that. It's very hard to get them to believe that the government is the reason why they're broke. All I say to people is I don't debate with people on this issue. I say, look at your paycheck, man. You get a pay stub, right? Where is the bulk of your money going? You went to work 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week. When you got your paycheck in 2 weeks, you should be able to sit down with a calculator, because you don't need to do it off the top of your head, how much you would make if you worked 40 hours a week. That would be 80 hours every 2 weeks. What your check should be. If you decide, you look at your pay stub and it's less than that, where did your money go? Where did it go? Walmart didn't take it. McDonald's didn't take it. Fucking the mega corporation that's on TV that the left is crying about, they didn't take it. The fucking government took it. They got their cut and then sent you the rest. After they took their Social Security out of it, your income tax out of it, your local tax out of it, everything. After they put their hands all in your pockets and swooped it out, now you get what's left. If you make $10 an hour, that's $80 a day. For 5 days, that's $400. In 2 weeks, that's $800, right? If you get a check at the end of those 2 weeks and it doesn't say $800, something went wrong, right? If you went to work thinking you was going to make $10 an hour, and then you got a paycheck and it doesn't reflect the fact that you made $800 in 2 weeks, that's a problem, right? You would think so. They just blame white people for it. Oh, it's the white man's fault. What the fuck? What the fuck? You're not going to talk about the mayor raising the cost of taxes just 2 weeks ago to pay for the fucking museums or whatever the fuck they're trying to do now? Completely didn't pay that no attention. It's clearly the white man keeping me broke. It's like, or it's the corporation, they're stealing my my wealth by making more profits or whatever the fuck. It's so dumb. It's so dumb. It's dumb. If you were to, if I think there should be a truth. That's like there's a truth in taxation. Like sometimes when you go into a store, a 99-cent bag of chips will be $1.09 or $1.07 or whatever, depending on what the local taxes are, because they're adding the taxes to the chips. So when you go and buy the chips, it's $1.07. Boop, there it is. They should add that tax to your income level. For instance, when your income, your per hour thing. If you make $10 an hour, but there's a 30% tax, you're not making $10 an hour, right? You're making $7. That's what you're making, right? So when you now they're not going to take, they're not going to make $7 every hour. They're not going to pay taxes per hour, but you're not going to get the $800 that you feel like you should have. What's 30% of 8? 160, I think. So maybe that'd be $640 or something like that. That's off the top of my head. My math might not be perfect, but it is what it is, man. But people are definitely not smart enough to be voting, and not accountable enough to vote. And there's nothing wrong with saying that. There's nothing wrong with saying that certain people shouldn't vote. There's nothing wrong with saying certain people are not in the best position to tell other people what to do. It's unfortunate. WG Phil says, is there a solution you propose to the removal of the income tax? Well, the income tax, as far as I know, is constitutional. So you would have to have a constitutional amendment to remove the income tax. It'll probably never happen. I believe it's actually in the Constitution of the United States. I forget which amendment it is, but they made sure to pass a constitutional amendment to allow for the income tax. But it's evil. The income tax is terrible. It's absolutely terrible. The property tax is just as bad. It's just as bad. Having people believe that you actually own property, that you can still be evicted from because you didn't pay a property tax, this is bullshit. And then it's a property tax that's in perpetuity, is forever. You could be paying on this thing for the rest of your life. It's like you're a rental. You're basically renting at that point. I don't know what more to say. It's like it would be great if people could recognize that stuff, but they don't. They don't recognize it. They're not taught to do so. They're not taught to recognize it, to think about things in that way. They think that this is just how it is. Or even worse, they're taught that it's a good thing. Oh yeah, what the left will say is taxes are the cost of living in a civilized society or something like that. Oh, you don't want to pay property taxes, but how else are you going to pay for schools? It's like, what? Who says we have to pay for schools? Who said that the state needs to pay for schools? Who said that? If you have more money, you can pay for the school your fucking self. You can pay for it yourself. It's like, now I'm not full and cap on these situations, of course. I do think that the government should exist to do certain things, but the government should be small. It should be a smaller government. Absolutely raise your own damn kids. You know, People have turned schools into daycare centers. They don't care if their children don't even learn. Actual Justice Warrior did a video about a school in Baltimore in which none of the kids, 0% of the kids, can do math in their own grade level. They can't do math. The more money you give to these schools, the dumber your kids are getting, which only leads for them to do stuff like, breaking the law again. If the kid is dumb, right, through some fault of his own, but mostly no fault of his own, because all the adults around him are dropping the ball, then what option do you leave them with? And this is the crazy thing, because this becomes a perpetual cycle, right? You sit down and you talk to a leftist about things about like drug dealing. They'll say, well, there's no opportunities for most black kids in the neighborhoods, so a lot of them turn to crime. And you'll say, okay, how about they learn about other things? Cutting grass, mowing lawns. They can work in landscaping. If they're a teenage boy, they probably got some decent muscles. They can help older people move. There's numerous things they could do without selling dope to make money. But when you realize that their education system is not teaching them how to hustle or how to make money or the virtue of making money legally, and then you take that into account when it comes to the iron law of incentives, meaning that people will do what they are incentivized to do, right? They're incentivized to go into crime because crime pays. Crime pays quicker than going to work. You get a paycheck every 2 weeks if you go work at Walmart. You can get a paycheck every 10 minutes if you go out and sell dope, right? You go out and sell dope, you'll have money in your pockets in 20 minutes. You go out to Walmart, you're going to go to Walmart, you're going to be working, you're going to be miserable, you're going to come home tired, you're going to eat shit and go to sleep, wake up, do it all over again. And in 2 weeks, you're going to get a paycheck that the government took a bite out of, and you're going to be like, oh, and you're going to do it again. And you're going to keep doing it. It's a high cost of living the right way in the United States, right? So how can you avoid income taxes? Well, by working under the table. I can avoid income taxes if I work under the table. So that's one option. What is the most money I can make in a single hour or so? If you can make $400 in a day, which you can do selling dope, then why wouldn't they? That's as much money as your uncle is going to make working at his regular job. It's practical, you know. It's simple incentives. It's simple incentives, and then you don't have to pay income taxes on it. You get money whenever you want. You can start your own. You can start selling dope at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, so you don't got to get up in the morning. You can work. You can play. You can do whatever you want, as long as you pay your connect or whatever. You can do whatever you want to do. Nobody's no. The police are watching you, but that's about it. There's no boss standing over you telling you what to do, telling you when to piss, telling you when you got to be back. There's nothing like that. And you make money. Oh, it's 100% incentive to sell dope. So you've created a situation where the kids don't know their opportunities. They don't know how to make their own opportunities. They can barely fucking count. They can barely fucking read. So you have created the situation in which the only thing they can do is sell dope. You've taken their fathers out of the home, and now they have to find their daddy in the street. You've created gangs. I mean, because who else is going to be a father figure except for a dude who's probably 2 years older than you? Like, how weird is that? I started seeing that. I didn't see it a lot in my generation, but I started seeing it a lot in like the generation right after mine, where the OG of the clique is like 3 years older than the other guy. Like, y'all went to high school together. You know, you're 17, he's 14. Y'all both stupid. But when you're 14, him being 17, especially if he got a little bit of money or something like that, he might as well be God, because he got everything that you want. He's going to have a car. He's going to have girls. You know, he's still young, so he's not like some crusty old dude telling you what to do. He's going to put you up on games. He's going to take you under his wing. You know, you created that situation by turning all the fathers into Fred Flintstone. You know, the dads are uncool, rotund weirdos who drink beer and watch football all day. I mean, it is. It is what it is, man. And I think that's a perfect little dovetail on this conversation, though, isn't it? Because if kids don't look at TV and see masculinity in upright, moral characters, they will find it in immoral characters. You hate, these guys supposedly hate Andrew Tate. Well, where's the left wing Andrew Tate? The left wing guy who preaches the goodness of masculinity and how, strong men can be and how they can take care of themselves and take care of their families and be providers or whatever. There aren't any. There are not any. Anybody who teaches personal responsibility, the good old idea of paternalism or male patriarchy, where you're responsible for the women in your life, you're responsible for your children, you're responsible for your neighborhood, you're responsible for everything like that. You're a patriarch. They shove you to the right. They don't want nothing to do with you. Oh, wait a minute. You think that Black Lives Matter was building society off the corpses of black males? Push you right on into the right wing. You could be a left wing on literally everything else. But you believe in that fathers are important? Huh! How dare you? We're going to stick Roland Martin on you. It's bizarre. It's bizarre. They have created the perfect situation for degeneracy. And then complain about the degeneracy. They love it. They love it because it creates more leftists for the vote and all that kind of stuff, man. It is what it is. But they have, and the weird thing is, I've seen a lot of guys that I respected buckle under the pressure, and I feel terrible. Like Killer Mike was one of those guys. I used to really look up to Killer Mike. Not look up to him as in like he was like a role model for me. But I used to like Killer Mike. He was a guy who stood for something. He was a guy who really wanted to help Atlanta. He was a guy who really wanted to care about his community, cared about his family, et cetera, et cetera. And then he sat down with Coleon Noir, who was at the time working for the NRA, the National Rifle Association. He got attacked from the left, And why are you sitting down with this right winger to talk about guns? Killer Mike likes guns. He said he wanted his children to learn how to use guns. But then as soon as he got attacked, his knees buckled, and all of a sudden, I didn't know Coleon Noir was going to do all of that stuff. He threw a man under the table. I was like, I can't respect that. That's real bitch made stuff right there, man. You didn't say nothing that was offensive in that conversation. You should have just been like, what? I am all about protecting my community. Of course, I'm talking about individuals should own guns. Of course, I want my daughter to own a gun. I don't want some idiot to jump out of the bushes and grab my kid. Of course, I want my son to own a gun. I don't want him to be in a club where some asshole decides to start a fight because he got his shoes stepped on, or for somebody to decide he was going to carjack him. Of course, I want to have my son to have a gun. I want him to be a man and know how to protect himself and his family one day. I want my daughter to protect herself from potential rapists or whatever the hell. But instead, his knees buckled. He decided, oh, it's not my fault. I was lied to. I was like, get the fuck out of here. And that kind of stuff happens literally all the time. And Killer Mike he's a Homer Simpson, a rotund dad who talks a good game, but when he was pressured, he buckled. That was very, very unfortunate. I still don't dislike him, but it was very, very unfortunate. It was very unfortunate. But you got it. I'm not saying that to be masculine is to be right wing. I'm not going to say that. I don't believe that. You can have, because sometimes guys are, let's say, excessive. You might have your heart in the right place, but like for me, let's say, it's tough for me to go full ANCAP because I know how the real world is, right? In the real world, there are people who are born disadvantaged, people who are born fucked up. They lost the genetic lottery, you know, and without the help of everyone, they will die, and they will die a miserable, horrible death. I am pro-life. I am not pro-choice. I believe everybody should be given an opportunity to be born. But but in saying that, I know that means sometimes people with multiple sclerosis or other types of really, really bad disorders are going to be born, right? I have worked with some people who are extremely developmentally delayed. They have the IQ of somebody it could be 20, the IQ of somebody 10 years old, or they could be a non-functioning teenager or a non-functioning young adult, and they have to be bathed, they have to wear diapers, etc., etc. I know that. That's the only reason, the literally only reason I say and that stuff should still be done locally. That stuff should still be locally. But that's the only thing that kills me when it comes to social safety net. Because sometimes people have very, very rare diseases, and it's very difficult to build a community around somebody who has a very, very rare disease. Because most people don't have the income and don't have the connections to have a private foundation for people who have this rare, very, very rare disease. There's a lot of very rare diseases out there, and sometimes there's rare diseases that only certain people get. Like there's I forget what it's called, Tay-Sachs, I think it is, that only Jews get. Try eliminating the social safety net and saying that so your baby was born with Tay-Sachs, and you're like, how do I get people to help with my with the medical care for my baby? Some people don't understand it. They think you're making it up. They're like, I don't know what the fuck is Tay-Sachs. I don't know what that is. It's something that only Jews get, or whatever. Or there's so many sick children in a general area for some odd reason. Let's say you live in Flint, and there's that water crisis, and now you have tons of children who are all poisoned at the same time. That's going to put a lot of strain on a local economy or a local system of individuals who are giving. That's going to put a lot of stress on it. Now, there's going to be some outside help, of course, but that's going to put a lot of stress on it, you know, and that could be very difficult. That's an opportunity for the government to step in and supplement. Um, so that's the one thing that keeps me from being like a complete and total ANCAP is I realize that some people are born disadvantaged. Some people are just born with very little hope, very little opportunity, and that's legitimate. It's going to be permanent and forever, not temporary, not a temporary issue. And some people are made incompetent or incapacitated. You I remember meeting a guy where I worked. He had a surgery scar down the base of his neck, all the way down to his shoulder blades, and he couldn't even. He turned around like Batman in the first two Batman movies, where he just turned all the way around, shoulders and everything. And I asked him like, what happened? He said he was in a car accident. Now his brain's fucked. He can't turn all the way around. Like he can't work because he can, mentally he's fucked now. It was a car accident. Was it his fault or whatever? I don't know for sure. But it's a really terrible situation that sometimes people can be made incapacitated. But I like to focus on people who are born that way. You know, um, and that's just unfortunate. All right, so Jesus Leyva. I remember an interview where Paul White said he had no role model. He's his own inspiration. Men need to start thinking that way. Um, that's nice, but I don't believe it. I don't believe it, and it doesn't really help either. Everybody has a role model to some degree. Because then you have to ask the question, where did his morality come from? Where did his sense of style come from? Where did his language come from? If he was his own inspiration, how did he inspire himself to be who he is? Like that that doesn't make sense to me. No, I think that's false. No man is an island. And that's another thing that prevents me from being like a full ANCAP. Like nobody's an island. You know, we're all born into a culture. We're all surrounded by people, different kinds of people all day. You probably met people you say, I don't want to be like him. And that inspired you to be something else. But in which case, you still kind of were inspired to be better than, if you had a bad father, let's say, your father was abusive, he was an alcoholic, or whatever the case may be, you may make the decision to, I'm never going to drink, or I'm going to be the opposite of what my father is. You can make that decision, and you were kind of inspired by that guy. It's a negative inspiration, but a negative inspiration is still inspiration. So I don't buy that. It's an interesting thing, but I don't buy that. What is my thoughts on assisted suicides? I think the government of Canada has gone way too far with that stuff. Generally speaking, you have the right to end your own life if you want to, but the government talking you into killing yourself is pathetic. It's very dangerous, and I'm very very disappointed that there's not enough Canadians talking about what's going on in Canada when it comes to the government sponsored assisted suicides. That it used to be people, again, mission creep. You go from individuals who are elderly and really really in need of end of life assistance, or they don't want to be a burden on their families anymore. But which could also be a sign of depression. You don't want to just kill people just because they're depressed. But their quality of life is very poor, and it will never be fixed. That's one option. But now they're killing teenagers and stuff like that. And you could do it without their parents' permission. And that, no, 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 no. I think if you want to kill yourself, though, you should be able to. I never understood the concept of, who controls your body. You do. If you want to kill yourself, kill yourself. Shit. What can't anybody else make that decision for you? But other people should have the ability to, you know, step in, but to what end? Counseling is the best thing that anybody can do, because if you really want to kill yourself, you'll do it. But the government shouldn't be putting their finger on the scale and counseling you into killing yourself. You know, that's garbage. I hate that. I really don't like that. Um, Jesus Leva says lots of doctors say they're all for assisted suicides, yet they won't do it when the situation actually happens. Yeah. Um, I think assisted suicides, if they were to occur, should be something that should be discussed with the person who will be dying, the doctor, and the person's immediate family member, like whoever is on in their will or their child or whatever, whoever is going to be the chief beneficiary of, if something were to happen to them, that person and maybe one other person, some kind of outside um, fourth party should be involved. Because sometimes, there might be a guy who says, "Oh, my dad, he's in such pain. He needs to die," but he's really just trying to get that insurance money. So there needs to probably be like an impartial fourth person who doesn't really know any of the parties involved. That should be a part of this sort of panel where they discuss whether this is the right thing to do. You know, yeah, that's the thing. Canada has socialized healthcare, so they're socializing suicide. I mean, you incentivize what you want, man. I mean, you incentivize what you want, and there it is. If the government look, I don't know what else to say. I'm looking at this situation and saying you're telling people free suicide, and the government is going to actively go after people to get them to commit suicide. Of course, they're going to eventually go too far, and there's going to be complete over the top numbers of suicide. Are you surprised? I'm not. I'm not surprised at all that a socialized healthcare system got as bad as it did. Um, Jesus Leva says, I think the main reason why I left that way about role models was I was remembering Atlas Shrugged in college. Ayn Rand had the idea that the ideal male is a lone island who will provide for himself. Um, in reality, if you are an adult, you should be able to provide for yourself to a degree, of course. But human beings are social animals, and we will always try to lean on each other, try to help each other. Um, and that was one of the things about Ayn Rand's philosophy that turns off a lot of people is, she kind of assumes that, society should have no impact on humanity. I choose to think of it as what she's saying is that there is no obligations between you and society, which there shouldn't be. There shouldn't be anybody in society that has an obligation to take care of you, and you have no obligation to take care of them. You know, but it's like I don't want to say like gorillas. Like you see those monkeys, they pick bugs off of each other, like they help each other. They pick bugs off of one another because if you die, then there's nobody to pick bugs off of me when the bugs get on me, right? Um, and that's how society is. I help you build your house so that you can help me build mine. That's capitalism. You know, it's a partnership. It's not a. It's the big one of the big crimes of the left is turning something that can be as helpful as capitalism into an evil. Think about it from a different perspective. You have nothing. You have no money. You have very little skills, and somebody offers you says, "Hey, I need some help with something. I'm willing to pay you to do it." You're like, "Wow, you could pay me. I could finally do something. I can finally take care of myself." So you take whatever it is that they're offering you, $10 an hour, $5 an hour, whatever. You show up, you get your $5 an hour, you help build this, whatever this is, this guy needs you to help him build. And then he goes off and he sells it for a profit, of course, because why else would he be doing it? And then you start getting jealous, like, wait a minute, uh, you just made X amount of dollars on that thing that I helped you build. And it's like, that's so horrible because this guy put money in your pocket and you had money in your pocket. You was taking care of yourself long before he decided to cash in on the labor that y'all was putting together. It's so evil because the idea that individuals can help each other and help each other move forward is very necessary in society. Everybody can, is going to be able to offer different levels of success and different levels of help, you know. And when you turn that into an adversarial situation that people are trying to get over on you or they're stealing from you or whatever, it does nothing for the people who need something, you know. If it just makes other people turn their back on them, you know. We should definitely be trying to work on fixing that relationship. You know, it's like your job is not to worry about how much a car costs once it's being sold. That's not that's not your responsibility. General Motors, right? And I had to learn this when I worked there. They do more than just sell cars. You know, they have to market the car. They have to drum up business. You have no part in that. Like when I worked at a company that worked for General Motors, I put what's called a headliner together. It's the inside roof of the car where the flaps that come down, you know, the mirrors or whatever. I used to screw those on. Nobody's going to buy a car without the headliners on it. That's just a fact. You're not going to buy a car and it's naked on the inside roof. So my job is important to put that up there. But I have absolutely nothing to do with the engine, the carburetor, the tires, the mirrors, the windows. I have nothing to do with any of that stuff. Why then should I get more money when I had absolutely nothing to do with 95% of the rest of the car, let alone with the marketing and the promotion of the car? I have nothing to do with that. But that's not how you were taught to think. You're taught to think that you deserve more. It's like it's it's awful. It's dumb. You know what I'm saying? Like, because you have to look at it from this perspective. You got paid anyway. There's no guarantee that they're going to get paid. That's what the risk is about. The risk is if I'm going to build a car that might not sell, you know, I'm going to help. I'm putting the roof, the inside roof of this car. Whether this car gets sold or not, I'm getting paid. But the company only gets paid when they sell a certain number of these cars. Because there's going to be a certain number of these cars that are moved that's just going to make it even. They need to sell a certain number of these cars in order to make what's called a profit. If they don't sell enough of these cars to make a profit, then how can I continue to keep getting paid? If they sell these cars and they either break even or they go into a loss, I could lose my job because I'm being paid out of the profits. It makes no sense that people think of it in an adversarial situation. You know, they hear about, oh, look at the UFC is a big one right now. You know, the fighters should get paid more money and all this kind of stuff. And that, we could do all of this stuff without the UFC. And it's like, okay, well, how about it? Do it. If you can do it, do it. Do it on your own. Do it right now. But they want to pass laws and all this kind of stuff. We're like, yeah, I don't know about that. But think about it. The UFC, and this is the story of the UFC, they went $45 million in the hole promoting the sport of MMA. They had to go to Congress and get the laws overturned because some laws banned mixed martial arts. They banned what I forgot what they called it, human cockfighting or whatever. They banned that stuff. The UFC was helped spend millions and millions of dollars getting the sport to where it is. And now the fighters jump off their couch and like, I should get more money. It's like, wait a minute, what do you mean? What do you mean you should get more money? All you're doing is showing up and fighting. Like, yes, you're training, but you would be paying those gym fees anyway. Because you go to that gym. You have to pay those gym fees anyway. Pay for the coaches and everything. Even if you go fight in Japan, you would have to pay for that. I think people should make as much money as they can, but you have to ask the question, how much is too much? Like creating this adversarial situation in which the fighters see themselves as victims who are being taken advantage of. It's like, well, the company has more to do than just to pay this set of fighters. You know, one thing that the UFC does, and the same thing WWE does, is that they have such a broad array of fighters. There's just so many fighters under the contract that they can't afford to pay exorbitant fees to individual fighters. It's the football NBA, for instance. They have a limit set for the teams. This is how many people are on a football team. This is how many people are on a basketball team. You don't anything else is extra. They're just floating out there. They're not making any money. WWE and UFC, because they're independent contractors, they don't have that. They can hire as many fighters or as many wrestlers as they want for whatever amount of money they want. So you can pay $10 million to Brock Lesnar, but then sign some college athlete for $100,000 if they want to, and there's no mandatory maximum. There's no mandatory minimum. They can do whatever they want. Now, the issue is when you start seeing UFC fighters talk about how much money they make, they do the exact same thing as a guy who works at Walmart. They look at it and they say, this is what Dana White said I was going to get. And then they turn around and say, but after I pay the gym and my income taxes and yada, 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 I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Wait. Pause. Let's talk about those expenses real quick. Let's talk about some expenses. Maybe ask your coach, why do I have to pay you so much money? Maybe ask your agent, why do I have to pay you so much money? Maybe worry about that income tax. Maybe we should be talking about that. There's a lot of things we should be discussing here, not just how much they get paid. Sure, everybody should get paid more. But we need to be talking about these expenses, these liabilities too. Now the sponsorship issue, which I know Jesus Label is talking about here, and it's one of the issues that has been discussed quite a bit when it comes to UFC. The issue with the sponsorships is that the UFC also has sponsors. So how could it be that the UFC is going to be sponsored by, I don't know, Coca-Cola, and then this fighter is going to show up with a Pepsi sponsorship? How is that going to work? How is it going to work if the UFC wants to be sponsored by Papa John's and you want to show up and be sponsored by Domino's? How is that going to work? Like that. It don't work that way. Now, if you want to say the fighter should be able to have a sponsor that does not conflict with the UFC sponsors, that's fine too. That's a conversation we should have. But then what happens when the fighter wants to have a sponsor that is offensive to the other sponsors or offensive to the sponsors of the UFC? What if, somebody wants to say, hey, man, I need the money. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to be sponsored by the Westboro Baptist Church. They're going to give me $30,000 to wear a T-shirt. So you walk in there that says, with a shirt that says, God hates FAGs. You're getting paid $30,000 to do it. And you show up in that shirt because you've been sponsored by the Westboro Baptist Church. You think the UFC is going to be okay with that? What about all the pride flags that's going to be around this place? They're going to be okay with that? No, of course they're not going to be okay with that. Let's say you walk in there with the Marlboro Man on your T-shirt or something like that. You're out here being a sponsor for cigarettes. There's going to be people who are going to be like, you have fighters on your roster that are promoting smoking cigarettes. We are against that. That promote the anti-LGBTQ community. We're against that. Where you have fighters that are promoting X, Y, and Z, and we are against that. So the best way to avoid it is to not allow the fighters to have sponsors. And I think they should make some kind of outline where the fighters can have sponsors within a certain reason. Something that's going to be completely benign, that's not going to offend anybody. Video games, for instance, I think is a perfect one. Now, it could be that, somebody's going to get a sponsorship for Hogwarts Legacy and somebody's going to be upset about that. But UFC, the fans are not really going to care that much. And the other sponsors are likely not to care that much either. So the fighters could be sponsored by like video games or, well, it can't be like vitamin water or anything like that because, the UFC has pretty much that locked up with their own official drink, their own official water, their own official Pepsi or whatever the hell. But there has to be some way for the fighters to be able to get some kind of sponsorship deal, that wouldn't upset other people, but would be able to supplement their income. Because I do believe that they should be able to have sponsorships. But that's a situation that you probably have to sit down with the UFC and discuss. But you're looking at a lot of the conflict of issues here, but that's between the individual fighter who has that situation and the company. That's not a group decision because if one fighter has a really good sponsorship deal set up and they're the ones who are going to be bumping heads with the UFC, he has to deal with that on his own. If it won't work, then it won't work. But to me, I think they should be able to have. I don't like the idea of guys having a single revenue stream. I don't like that. I don't like that idea because I know that the way for people to make money in America is to have multiple revenue streams. So they should be able to be allowed to have multiple revenue streams. And the UFC, if they could find a way to allow this, or to limit the sponsorships for the fighters and create a pool of sponsorships for the fighters, this would be great. But if the UFC is going to have their own official gym shoe and therefore the fighters can't have gym shoe sponsorships, they're going to have their own official drink so the fighter can't have a drink sponsorship. There's going to be something somewhere that the UFC is not going to be involved in that the fighter can make some money off of. And I know that the NBA sometimes has that too, where they might have their own official uh, shoe or like but a lot of those deals are individual anyway with the individual player. So Nike had an individual deal with this player and this player. Reebok has a deal with this player and this player. But then they'll have like a deal for the jerseys or something like that. So maybe that's what they'll have to do. Is they'll have to do official things for the UFC, but they have the official trunks of blah 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 blah, and then the fighters get a pool of that money, or whatever the case may be. Or they need to create like a pool where maybe the guys can't get a sponsorship, but they can get money out of that pool. They need to do something for sure because the fighters don't make enough money. That part is absolutely true. But it's not because the UFC is fucking everybody either. It's expensive to run these venues. It's expensive to run pay-per-views. It's expensive to have all of these fighters under contract, and that's an expensive venture. They're not running on a shoestring budget here, But the fighters also have to take some responsibility too. If you think it's a shitty contract, don't sign it and go somewhere else. So I've talked for 2 hours and had no intention of doing so. I thought this was only going to be an hour. But apparently the Super Bowl is over. Not that I care. But thanks everybody for showing up. It's and I'll talk to you guys later. Ah, damn. That applause came out of nowhere. All right. Peace out, y'all.